I introduce you in detail, Liezl, and hand over to you, it'll be interesting to run another poll just to explore how we are all feeling about our comforts in engaging in international travel right now. Could you perhaps run that for me now, Emma? So how comfortable do you feel to travel internationally at this point? Very comfortable, reasonably comfortable, slightly uncomfortable, or not comfortable at all? As Liezl and her team know, I am very comfortable. I was ready to travel in April, and I've been chasing them as to when we're going to start flying again. So as we wait for those results to come in, Liezl, you've got a great job. You lead Virgin Atlantic in Africa, in the Middle East and India, some huge markets. We've read a lot about Virgin Atlantic over the last 6 months. You are great partners of the British Chamber, but you're critical to the tourism industry here. How is your world changing? What have you seen in these last 6 months? And how do you see it changing in the coming days and weeks?
Thank you, Leon, for the introduction, and just a huge thank you to the British Chamber and to Nigel, the High Commissioner, for allowing us to partner in this event. I think everyone is super anxious to know about what will the world look like in the future in terms of travel, and we're delighted to kind of share as much as we possibly can with you this morning. I think when we were together at the eve of Parliament earlier this year at Nigel's residence, I don't think any of us envisaged that the next 6 months would look the way it did. And of course, we realize and we accept the fact that this is going to be a very, very challenging time for a long time still to come. And we certainly have managed to survive for the last 6 months. I think that initially in the media, there was a lot of reports, a lot of talk about the aviation industry. We've seen many airlines enter administration or business rescue. And, you know, Virgin Atlantic wasn't immune to any of that. We were right there with the same level of uncertainty exposed, because basically zero passenger flying was happening from the month of April all the way through to pretty much the end of July, when we basically reintroduced just 3 flights. And all that we did in the time that commercial flying that ceased, we only operated some cargo services and some repatriation services. So again, I think when Nigel and I said, let's bring Cape Town back in December, neither one of us would have thought that we would bring Cape Town back as a repatriation flight for for British nationals to repatriate them back to London. But we did do that, obviously, in partnership with the Foreign Office. And the road ahead is going to be testy and difficult. And I think we always knew that that when we finally hear that the borders will reopen, that it would be done in a risk-adjusted fashion. We knew it was made very, very clear by the president when he did say we'll be identifying high-risk countries, and knew at that point in time that the UK will probably be on that particular list because of the rising cases. So we understood that there would be challenging time ahead. And of course, now yesterday we've got a lot more to go with, a lot more than what we had, you know, just a couple of weeks ago. But still a lot to clarify, as Nigel's pointed out. It's very sort of vague still in some instances, and we need to obviously have a lot more clarity. I think the thing that we do know is that the UK is obviously on a high-risk list. We do know that there is some business travel permitted, and there's all sorts of approvals that needs to accompany that travel. And we know that leisure travel for the short term, at the very least until they review the high-risk countries, will remain restricted. And that makes it quite difficult.
It does, and I think, Liezl, at that point, it'd be perhaps interesting to explore where our audience are at this stage.
Yes.
In terms of the poll results. If you could cue those, Emma, so we could have a look, that'd be great.
Yes.
So,
oh wow.
So that's
really good.
Well, I'll read them out, because when we post this on our social media channels, this doesn't come up. So very comfortable in terms of can't wait to get on board, 25%. Reasonably comfortable, 32%. So half of us are ready. 37% are uncomfortable, with only 6% won't travel until a vaccine is available. And perhaps they're the people that are looking for another 6 months lockdown. And again, welcome comments and questions around that. Perhaps, Liezl, we'll reflect on those answers, but shall we run the first video in terms of what flying looks like now? If you could cue that up for us, Emma, that'd be great.
Yes, absolutely. So that was a really good poll because we can understand how people are feeling about potentially traveling, and it's really a great opportunity for us to showcase what would an airport experience feel like nowadays when you do choose to fly internationally. What would you be experiencing?
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Vice President of Airports at Virgin Atlantic. I'd like to take a moment to talk you through some of the measures we're putting in place on the ground to keep you safe. We are working very closely with our airport partners, both here in the UK and around the world. The health, safety and well-being of our customers and our people is always our top priority.
When you arrive at the airport, you may be asked some health screening questions to make sure it's safe for you to fly. Temperature checks may be in place at the airport. You'll notice marks on the floor, so we can all ensure a safe distance. We all need
a little space sometimes.
All surfaces are regularly cleaned and disinfected. We'll help you make a clean getaway. At the gates, we'll ask you to show us your passports and scan your own boarding passes.
We'll limit boarding to 10 customers at a time to ensure everyone can maintain a safe distance. We require that you wear masks at all times while on board. Each customer will receive a health pack containing masks, wipes and gel. It will be our great pleasure to welcome you on board.
Things may take a bit more time and things may feel different, but we thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you for flying Virgin Atlantic.
I think, Liezl, maybe an opportunity to expand on what those introduced protocols are. And then we could perhaps run the poll again and to see if people feel more inclined. I think we're just about 50% of us ready to travel, with a quarter that have been ready for some time. But perhaps
we need to get them over the line.
Absolutely. So what would you say on the back of that video in terms of how has this implicated your kind of business model, but equally, how has it implicated the customer experience? And what are your comfort levels in these new protocols?
Yeah, so maybe I can just start off by saying that aviation is probably one of the most regulated industries in the world. And so, you know, in terms of implementing protocols and standard operating procedures, to do so in the aviation industry is actually very easy for governments or official companies to do, because we have to subscribe to such rigid protocols and we have to report back on that. And there's consequences to not complying with these protocols by way of fines or reputational risk, etc. So from a regulatory perspective, I think that, you know, you probably should have comfort that you'll probably be safer in an airport on board an aircraft than what you would be going down to the local grocery store to buy your weekly groceries, just purely because there is such intensity around the cleaning regime. And really that is what it is about. In the future, it's all going to be about cleaning, and we have a huge amount of investment into our fleet, not only from our fleet perspective, but also from the additional protocols that we brought on board to do deep cleaning, to really make people feel safe. There's things like a HEPA filter on board our aircraft, and this has become a bit of a buzzword. You may have heard about it in the media, but HEPA has got quite a lot of hype around it. It's basically a filtration system that's on board any one of our aircraft, or any aircraft actually in the world, that circulates and cleanses the air every 2 to 3 minutes. So I think that the concern that you're going to be sitting around bugs, you know, with that filter kind of obviously running through the filtration system, the air filtration on board will help things along. And then the other things is really there will be low touch environment. You can see from the airport video, you know, it's self-scanning your boarding pass. You know, cabin crew will be wearing PPE equipment, and we'll also be handing out health packs to customers. So there's free face masks and hand sanitizer, etc., that everyone that is on board will receive. And then obviously the expectation is there for you to keep your mask on. But just to give it an extra layer of safety, one of the things, Virgin Atlantic is actually one of the only airlines in the world, along one or two others, that's introduced COVID-19 cover. So automatically included in your ticket, at no additional cost to you, is a COVID-19 cover up to £500,000. So should you get sick, or should you need to be repatriated, or should you be hospitalized, or should you not be well for whatever reason, that is already automatically part of your ticket, and that's valid until the end of March next year. And then in addition to that, if you're feeling unwell, we're absolutely encouraging people to not get on planes when they're feeling unwell. Obviously, we don't want there to be any concerns in passing on any viruses. The flexibility around our commercial rebooking policy is extremely generous. I mean, if you're holding an existing ticket with Virgin Atlantic, you have right up until the end of September 2022 to rebook to. So, and that's been constantly revised. So I think that, you know, there's flexibility around traveling. If you don't feel well, don't travel. If you are flying, make sure that you understand the protocols, make sure that you understand what you're going to get yourself in for. Just be prepared for the experience.
Yeah. But perhaps, given all those measures you've put in place, we can run the poll again, Emma, and see if we've shifted the dial with our audience.
We've shifted the dial a bit. I hope so.
I'm wondering if we should look at the video first of what it's going to look like on board, possibly before we move to the next
Cecilia.
And then I've got a question from Yolanda that I'll feed in after that also.
Good.
Perfect. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Cornel Koster, Chief Customer Officer here at Virgin Atlantic, and I'd like to show you some of the measures we're taking to ensure our aircraft cabins are clean, hygienic, and safe for you to fly in.
Our aircraft are cleaned after every flight with a hospital-grade EPA and EU-registered disinfectant product. This has been proven to be highly effective against bacteria, fungus, and viruses. On top of our meticulous cleaning across our cabins, we also carry out an additional enhancement to that cleaning, which is aircraft fogging. That ensures that the chemical settles on all surfaces and nooks and crannies, ensuring that every area is sanitised and disinfected.
Air inside the aircraft is fully refreshed every 2 to 3 minutes. It goes through a filter, and that filter filters out 99.999% of bad things. Any sort of things that you wouldn't want in your breathing air, that's what the HEPA filter is there for. Our main priority remains the safety and well-being of our customers and our people. Thank you for putting your trust in us. We look forward to seeing you back on board soon.
Shall we cue the poll and see if we've managed to bring people with us?
Yes.
I think so.
So it's the same question again. Given what we've seen, how comfortable do you feel to travel internationally at this point? And perhaps while people are putting in that poll response and we're waiting for the results, Cecilia, you could feed in the first question to Liezl.
Yes, and I think it might touch also, I know, Liezl, you've briefly mentioned about testing and what you guys are doing as part of your health measures on that. I think I'd like to hear a bit more about that. But an interesting question from Yolanda Simon saying, her client has a work permit for Bermuda and needs to transfer between London Heathrow and London Gatwick. Would such a passenger need to self-quarantine, or how will transit passengers be assisted? So this is an interesting one to possibly comment on, and I think possibly testing regimes and what they could have that might make this smoother for them will become relevant here.
I think we're possibly going to have to take that question away because I actually don't know the answer to it personally. So, I mean, my assumption is that if you're leaving, and this is my assumption, if you were transiting at Heathrow, so you were entering a terminal, staying airside, or even going landside and then back airside again, that you would remain within the airport space. And for that reason, you would not need to quarantine. But the minute you leave the airport and you go on to another facility altogether, then my assumption would be that there would be some quarantine that would come into play. But I'm not certain what the situation is airport to airport. And maybe let me tell you why. So one of the very first things that we did when we went through sort of big and tough decisions around the future of Virgin Atlantic, is we actually shut our entire Gatwick operation entirely. So the Virgin Atlantic doesn't operate in and out of Gatwick at all anymore. We're flying into Heathrow Terminal 2 and we depart from Terminal 2. Now normally Terminal 3 would have Cecilia, if we can keep that one on the side, and then we can maybe check in with Nigel and his team if there's clarification around what happens when you transfer between airports.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if the country you came from, you know, every country, as we've seen with South Africa, has their high alert passengers and low alert. So I'm wondering if it would be a case of if you are a high alert country passenger, you won't be allowed to do that, but possibly if you're in the lower risk category, you might be allowed to do so. Speculation, and I would hope someone's considered the question, but then also learned not to make assumptions about these things. So it is an interesting one, Yolanda, that we unfortunately can't answer specifically, but it is definitely worth pausing on that one and looking into it if you want to avoid possible unforeseen complications.
I think it's great, and if I encourage people to raise these questions during this forum that we can discuss, because equally we can push these questions back through the High Commission. On a very personal level, I've been looking how to get to London for some time. I've also been looking at, I've got a teenage son in London, looking at how he can come back to South Africa. And now we still have the 14-day quarantine should he return. However, if he flies via Turkey, he can stay with friends in Turkey for 10 days, then come back into South Africa with no problem whatsoever. So the current regimes, there are loopholes and gray areas, which I believe the more we discuss and lean on each other and ask for support, we can find solutions, which again, the whole point of having this chamber network is to support each other. And I do sense, as you heard the High Commissioner and Liezl has been saying, we're going to be living and navigating gray for some time. And my big concern is that we actually address a lot of this before the main tourist season kicks in. Perhaps, Seema, we could see the outcomes of the poll that we've just run. Wondering if it's almost identical. It's almost very similar, very similar. But I think we've still got a good percentage of people there, Liezl, that are encouragingly willing to fly. So just continuing on the theme, having put all these measures in place, looking at the restrictions the government have put in, how has that impacted your business model? There must be some significant cost implications, and how's that impacted the morale of your team, and both here and internationally?
Yeah, so obviously the South African situation was just literally closed borders for 6 months, and as an airline, that we are heavily exposed with our travel between the UK and the Northern Transatlantic. So everything that happens between the UK and the USA puts our business at risk. And so for as long as the US borders remain closed, that is how long we will continue to have to really reshape and resize and reorganize our business to survive for the longest period of time until we can kind of come out of this hibernation phase and fly again. So the reality is, you know, we are starting to obviously see positive signals. So in my region, Middle East, Africa and India, South Africa is the last country to reopen borders. So across my whole region, every country is now open and flying, and we actually seeing a positive, obviously with restrictions. So there's all sorts of, so in Nigeria, we have limitation in number of passengers on a plane. In the between UK and India, it's only available to Indian nationals and under an air bubble agreement and so forth. So there's all sorts of different restrictions that apply country by country. And as airlines, we just have to navigate this very, you know, difficult environment, because it's not just a difficult environment, it's ever changing. So today, it could be fine, tomorrow it's high risk, and then we have to reposition the business again. And it's been tough. It's really been very difficult. Pre-COVID, I think we had a record year planned. We had lots of expansion plans, new routes on the radar. And from March to now, we've basically lost about half of our workforce. We've retired every single one of our older aircraft. All the 747s, all the 340-600s have been retired. But the good news is that we now have a very clean and new and fuel efficient fleet that, you know, when we can start to operate normally again, people will have a really good experience on board with us. And in addition to that, you know, until such time as the US borders reopen, we have a lot of focus on these markets outside of the US. And so despite the fact that there are these restrictions in place in South Africa, we are absolutely committed to coming back to South Africa. We're slightly more cautious than some of our European aviation friends. So I did not have to send a 20-minute before departure request to Dirk or anyone else to get my flight off the ground last night. So thankfully that we didn't have that stress, but we will have our first flight southbound from Heathrow to Joburg on the 18th of October. And we are still planning to come to Cape Town later this year on the 10th of December, but it is so reliant on whether leisure tourism will be permitted, because that is, you know, that is going to be the, I mean, it's a number one source market for tourism to South Africa is the UK. So we need leisure tourism to be permitted for us to restart Cape Town. So we're obviously watching the regulations very carefully, and we're very excited to restart as soon as we can. But we do know that it's still going to be tough for the coming months, until such time as we sort of get through all of this, you know, all of this uncertainty around how the virus moves around the world.
I think we'll come back to that tourism piece, because I think a lot of our audience is from the tourism industry, and, you know, beyond our own personal aspirations to travel again, I think it's critical we share what we know. You're working in these other markets, which are significant markets for Virgin Atlantic as well, the Middle East, India. What has been the demand following COVID for people to uptake and start traveling again? And perhaps what has the government communication been like with those areas versus with South Africa? Are there things we could learn from to influence the South African government to enable a speedier opening? So a couple of questions there.
Yeah, so it's all really good questions. So they all they all follow a little bit of a sort of similar pattern to South Africa. We wait until the very last minute, and then we get the information, and then we all scramble, and we have 100 million questions, not sure of all the details. So I can't say that there's any place that's doing it like really right. I think we're all learning as we're going along. And I think the benefit with South African borders being closed for so long, and this is credit to the government, is that they've had the opportunity to really engage with industry. And we've done so very proactively through various industry bodies. So with BASA, with the TBCS, BUSA, etc., we've managed to kind of feed in a lot of our intel and information, and a lot of that was considered when they announced reopening of borders yesterday. You know, a lot of what we had recommended in the risk-adjusted process, and we understand that high-risk countries will remain high risk. So we weren't being unreasonable. We understand that these things will happen with time. But, you know, there's no country that's really shining and getting a drag, because I think we're all kind of managing something that is completely unknown. In terms of demand, I mean, there are some routes that are absolutely maxed out, so we cannot get enough passengers on the planes. So China, for instance, and Hong Kong have really done extremely well, but it's very restricted and very limited in terms of the number of flights we fly per week. Nigeria is just flown off the shelves, so we have a limit, a cap per flight, so we get up to 200 passengers, or we can maximum get up to 200 passengers on flight, and we book all 200 because that's the demand on that route. I suspect that for South Africa, it will probably be soft to start. October and November has always typically been slightly soft months, but I don't know any patterns or any normal demand patterns don't really exist anymore. But I anticipate that we probably won't see massive load factors to start with. And I think that we've accepted that as an airline. I think most airlines have realized that in order to restart, we're going to have to really just, you know, take what we can get initially and rebuild confidence. That's what we need to do, is we need to get people to feel confident. I know, I mean, I did 54 long haul flights last year, and I did my first Joburg Cape Town a couple of weeks ago, and I was absolutely traumatized by the experience. I was like, oh my God, I have to do this form, and I have to submit this, and I have to do this check. And I didn't even have to do a test, a COVID test beforehand. So the anxiety levels, we're going to have to manage that. Even with the most seasoned travelers, we're going to have to take them on this journey with us and get them to feel confident about traveling again.
And if I can just come in here, sorry, Leon, but you're speaking to exactly what we were talking about earlier this morning. We decided we're going to put a poll out to this, because we assume that maybe a lot of people are put off by the COVID cleaning factor, but then a lot of people are actually put off by the additional admin and anxiety of going through airports. and things like that. So we've got a poll on that, and we'd like to see how the audience feels about that. There we go. My main concern about flying internationally would be, and you have to choose one, COVID-19 infection at the airport, COVID-19 infection while on board, additional protocols as a result of COVID, the risk of travel regulation changes while overseas, example, getting stuck somewhere, and the possible need to self-isolate before, after, or during your trip. It's going to be interesting to see that one.
Yeah, I know you traveled recently, Cecilia, just to the Cape. I'm off on my first trip on Sunday. How was it for you in terms of the additional admin? What were your biggest gripes?
I think, first of all, the airports were still really quiet. International wasn't open at all, so that possibly made a difference. But there is some more queuing. There's printed paperwork. I printed everything ahead of time and did it. So it was actually okay. But I think if you are all right and comfortable with these types of processes in airports anyway, that's okay for you. I know a lot of people, including my parents, for example, who that type of thing is very scary for them. An airport is scary for them to start with. So if they have to deal with that on top, not very happy about it at all. And otherwise, I'm more comfortable. I did find it slightly strange having to have a mask on for the entire duration of the flight, but you also quickly get over it. And it was a 2-hour flight, so not too long. I found it okay, but it is a different thing to what you were used to. It's not the same type of excitement and buzz that you usually would get from a trip.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember traveling with children with the unabridged passports and all the admin you required. And as a seasoned traveler, traveling with kids just became incredibly stressful. Documentations, translations, and none of them removed that. But again, these additional barriers to movements do impact us economically, like barriers to investment. I think we can call the poll results up, Ema. I think they've come through. And I know some of you wanted multiple choice. So very little, 1% being put off by infection at airport, 5% infection while on board, 70% the additional protocols, over half getting stuck overseas while traveling, and again, a quarter the need to self-isolate. So I think the kind of contextual global uncertainty around the shifting regulations are what are impacting all of us, 75% of us. So, a quarter being the admin, 3/4 being stuck or in some form or another, which again, as an operator, we have little control over other than the ability to influence that, which is quite interesting.
And I think that also speaks to, I've seen 2 questions, and they're both related really to once you get back into South Africa. It relates to passports and visas. Liezl, you might have some general knowledge just on this too. I realize it's difficult because South African regulations and policies, they've only just been released now. So there's going to be a lot of loopholes and things that no one's possibly thought of before. But people are worried about the fact that if I leave the country on a South African or a British passport to go to the UK, that seems to not be a big problem at this stage. But then returning from the UK, we've had Steve Braham saying, I've applied for a new South African passport. My old one's expired. This is now being delayed. So that's a problem. I can exit the country on my British passport, but when I return, will I be allowed back in if I've got a British passport, but I've also got proof that I'm in the process of renewing my South African passport, and here's my application and all of that. Not sure if we can answer those questions, Liezl, if you've had any experience with that specifically. And I think also the case is if you are entering South Africa again from the UK, but via a place like Turkey, that was a specific question. Will you be required to quarantine in Turkey? And then it'd be okay for you to enter South Africa? Would you have the proof of that? Would that be okay? I think these are questions that, again, I'm not sure even the regulators at this stage have considered all of these options. Yeah. And I'm wondering actually what I'm getting from all of these questions is we should draw them all together actually and pose them to the Department of Home Affairs and International Relations and say, this is the stuff people are wondering about, and see if we can get a bit of a frequently asked questions page running on maybe on our channels.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. I would exercise massive caution in advising on giving visa advice or travel advice without being 100% certain myself.
Yeah.
So I think it'd probably be best to take some of that away. And, you know, this is the kind of, I mean, just, you know, Leon, you were talking earlier about, you know, unabridged birth certificate and all of that additional admin. And we know, we've done our own research, and we understand that all of this, people are just going to be like, I'd rather just wait until there's a vaccine, or I'd just rather wait a little bit later until things seem a little bit clearer, or a little bit safer. We get that. We do also know that there's a group of people who desperately need to reconnect with family, or, you know, have missed big events, or have, you know, whatever the reason is. And I think that, you know, for those people who definitely need or want to travel, I think that the important part is to know that it is a very regulated industry. You know, all the safety measures have been put in place. There's pre-tests and post-tests that's going to be taking place. There's quarantine where it's necessary to kind of protect people, so that if you do want to undertake that trip in the foreseeable future, before such time as a vaccine is available, at least you have faith in the fact that you should be safe, you know, from a health perspective.
Yeah. I think you're doing a lot to kind of give comfort around what Virgin Atlantic have done in terms of keeping us safe. Our audience is suggesting we're not really worried about getting COVID. We're worried about the implications of the external policy piece, which, as you've said, and what was really encouraging is through BUSA, through ourselves, through the High Commission, we've been able to give you a voice, and you've been listened to. I think we have opened the borders to date, largely to African countries, but hopefully in the next 2 weeks, we're going to see what that means more internationally. I think specific questions we still welcome on the Q&A, but given that policy uncertainty right now, perhaps we can address the travel industry, the airline industry more broadly, and what you're seeing. And we've got a few areas that we could perhaps discuss, but I mean, quite a simple one in terms of what significant ways has travel changed across the board for airports and flight operators. And I think we heard about SAA, was it last night or the night before? Again, the business rescue practitioners grounding them. What are you seeing from a Virgin Atlantic perspective around the future of travel and airport travel?
So the reality is that there's no business that can actually, if it's already been in dire straits, and we know that South African Airways has obviously had a world of pain even before COVID-19, and if you then suddenly in a situation where you've generated zero or nearly no revenue for as long as 6 months, you know, the expense of running such a business is obviously exhaustive, and the challenge of keeping going is massively challenging. And, you know, right from the outset, when we saw this whole thing unfolding, you know, Virgin Atlantic actually was in the media quite a bit right in the very beginning of COVID in the UK around its, you know, is it going to survive? Are we going to be around? You know, there were lots of questions around the long-term longevity of the airline. And I'm personally delighted to share that a couple of weeks ago, we've managed to announce the solvent recapitalization of Virgin Atlantic. It's a privately funded recapitalization. There's no government involvement in that, and it's made up in a combination of pieces, some shareholder investment, some shareholder payment deferring, and a new investor brought into the business, and then some new terms with creditors. So all in all of that together is 1.2 billion pounds of recap for the business, and that gives us the comfort that certainly in the near term, we have the cash in hand to kind of navigate the stormy waters that lies there. And we know that it's going to continue to be difficult, and we know that we're not going to be able to switch on the entire network and bring all the fleet back and all our staff back. We know that that's going to take time. But at the very least, that along with things like COVID cover and insurance and things should hopefully give people the comfort that it's safe to travel with Virgin Atlantic in the near term, and also that, you know, that as a business we aim to survive. We want to be here for a long time still.
I think that's interesting, and you've now mentioned all of the things that have changed, and it's difficult to manage and maintain the same workforce, because it's difficult to maintain the same services you have as well too. And we had a question from Killian Ryan. who said along those lines, do you, Liezl, perhaps see any dynamic mergers and acquisitions in the aviation space going forward? You know, when you find that you can't quite do the same thing you've done in the years, mergers and acquisitions is one option. What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely think that the industry is going to trim down significantly in the near term. I can't see it being anything else. I definitely think that there will be more partnerships and more opportunities for people or for businesses to come together and reimagine or rethink their business model. But truthfully, we don't see a recovery, a proper aviation recovery, probably until 2023. So it's going to take a long time to get there. You know, consumer confidence is at an all-time low. So not only is the world economy a mess, we're also contending with the pandemic and the fact that people are worried about passing on the virus as they're traveling. So there's these two different pieces that sit behind key decision-making for travel. So we realize and we accept the fact that it's going to take a long time to build, to build consumer confidence back. And I think initially the aviation industry is really, really going to trim down. I think that we've already seen quite a lot of hardship. And I think that there will be more to come. I can't see that governments are just going to completely continue to throw money at state-owned airlines or any other airlines for that matter in the short term. And eventually they're going to have to sort of get through this process and come out the other end. And then post that, once we through sort of the next 6 to 12 months or beyond that into 24 months, I definitely believe that there's probably going to be more consolidation around the world, because that would make sense. It would make sense to do that rather than being lone rangers.
Yeah.
You touched on the two challenges here. We have the kind of post-COVID context of people fearing the pandemic, but we've got the economic cost of that, and they're like a double whammy hitting the industry. Also, what's happened is, given the world we found ourselves in, organizations have had to evolve and adapt as to how they operate. And this is our 15th webinar in the last few months, for example. We're connecting on Zoom. I was running a project across 9 time zones during lockdown, whereas previously I'd have been on a plane traveling to visit these clients. So do you see this new world of work, this new way that Zoom now is impacting our space, also impacting on the future of business travel?
And definitely in the near term, we absolutely expect that it would impact on the decision making, not only because of the things that I've mentioned before, the virus, et cetera, but also, if you're a small business owner, or you're even working for a big corporation, the first thing that people would do is they're going to look and see, how can we save costs? Well, T&E is always a good line to save costs in. So, travel expenses is probably something that most corporates will be looking very, very hard at, and ask the questions like, do you really need to be on the plane, or can you do that on a web call? So we absolutely expect that there will be a depressed business market for the near-term future. We absolutely believe that that is going to be the new normal, and that people will rely more on webinars. But we do absolutely also believe that there's a need and a necessity for people to engage in person and interactively. And there's certain things that you just simply cannot do. So if you're a specialist and there's a specific skill set and you need to travel because you need to do, some sort of engineering piece of work, you need to actually get to the site to do the work that you need to do. There's a reason for you to travel. Then people will still need to travel. But the predictions, and certainly if you look at all media reports, it's going to take time for that confidence to come back. And if anything, we believe that we'll find visiting friends and relatives or leisure travel will probably rebound first, and that travel domestically, people will get confident about traveling domestically, and eventually they'll maybe feel a little bit more confident about traveling regionally, and eventually then internationally. We know that there's going to be a lag, and that there will be a depressed market for some time.
Interestingly, a lot of the clients and members we've engaged with, I think once you have an established relationship, you can continue it virtually. But actually, a lot of those relationships are built when you travel together, when you meet in person. Yep. Somebody just commented about meeting in restaurants and coffees. But equally, on a personal level, many of us have built our lifestyles and families on multiple continents in multiple countries, which takes a long time to unravel that, and many of us don't want to. But I think that this period of the 6-month lockdown has been an opportunity for innovation and looking to the future. And many of the discussions we've had is actually how much has the airline industry evolved in the 50 years since Concorde was first born. And then I was actually living in France when Concorde ceased to exist. And, you know, given the innovative background of Virgin Atlantic and some of the trials, and us being down here on the southern tip of the world, which we really felt during lockdown, you know, it's the first time I felt like I was quite a long way from home. Do you see some innovations, some new technologies, be it through fuels, through supersonic travel? What can we look forward to? What is the thinking? What's on the blue sky and the horizon for us to get excited about in terms of the future of travel?
So that's a really, really good question. And I think that COVID has actually forced airlines to make really, really tough decisions around fleet and network. And you would have seen, I mean, much like Virgin Atlantic, most airlines around the world would have by now retired their older fuel guzzling aircraft. And that immediately impacts positively on the environment. And actually this year was going to be a very, very big year with CORSIA. It's an environmental implementation really around how we can be more environmentally friendly. And that was going to be a really, really big year for us in implementing some of the plans to really kind of drive more, you know, sort of safe traveling and reduce carbon emission. The big thing is when you're operating two-engine aircrafts like we do, the 787s, the 330s, the 350s, you burn significantly less fuel. It's far better for the environment. But not only that, there's carbon offsetting plans in place. You can actually invest in the environment for, you know, and that was one of the things that was going to be CORSIA related to implement, to actually give back to the environment. And that's really absolutely key. I mean, airlines have been forced to get rid of older aircraft, which has been fantastic for the environment. And now with more fuel efficient aircraft, we as an airline have already seen significant reduction in fuel and carbon emission as a result of just making these changes to our fleet. And that's probably going to be the way of the future. Airlines are going to look for more efficient ways of purchasing aircraft. The fleet needs to be more fuel efficient so that we can be more environmentally friendly. And then there's a lot of work that's going on around biofuel testing. In fact, Virgin's been working with a company called Liezl for many years around the testing of biofuel. And I want to say it's probably about a year ago now that we did our very first long-haul flight purely just on biofuels. So, you know, these kinds of things are things that we need to rapidly investigate, invest in. It's at the moment, it's not cost efficient to do because producing biofuel is significantly more expensive than buying normal oil. But at the same time, these are things that we need to expedite, and we need to have a look and see what can we do differently to be more environmentally friendly. And people and businesses are far, far, far more aware around these kind of environmental causes than what they had been in the past. And 50 years ago, that wouldn't have even been a consideration because fuel was really cheap, and you could get away with buying cheap fuel and flying full planes everywhere in the world. It's a different world now, and airlines will need to adapt.
Yeah, the UK are leading the environmental conference, COP24, is it at the end of next year, that John Wade Smith's going to be championing.
Yes.
And I think what's been interesting is in terms of carbon footprints, there's actually been, we've stopped the world for 6 months, travel has stopped, but the reduction in carbon outputs has only really come down by 3 to 4%. And the global target for this year was actually 7. So there's this debate to say, even if we stop and suspend all travel, can we possibly shift the dial under the current paradigms in which we're operating? So I think, like you've said, this COVID, it forced experiment around fuel has really made us look at these new technologies, which you've outlined, biofuels, other fuel systems. Perhaps thinking in a slightly more space age and thinking about Virgin Galactic, Hyperloop, supersonic travel. What do we see in the future? I know there's been some talk in the industry around Joburg to London 4 or 5 hours. Is something that is on Virgin's agenda for the next 10 years in terms of decreasing travel time for long haul?
I'll phone Richard and ask him that question. I'm absolutely certain it's on the top of his to-do list. He's always looking at, these pioneering opportunities and challenging the status quo and just being this real challenger brand. And so certainly, I think the near-term objective is obviously get ourselves through this crisis, and then, be really, really creative and very innovative in how and what we can do differently. And, that means that we can somehow find a way of getting somewhere in 4 to 5 hours. That would be a dream. But I can honestly say it's not in any of the business plans I'm looking at the moment.
Sure. No, I appreciate we're in a state of survival right now, and which it's great to hear Virgin coming through strong, recapitalized, Necker Island not being remortgaged, and we're still very keen to maintain these routes. We got close there. And there actually are some really positive, encouraging themes coming out, which I will perhaps summarize on shortly. Perhaps, Cecilia, are there any final comments or questions from our members or audience?
No, not so much. I could definitely just pick up. There were loads of questions around the quarantine aspect. A lot of people, and I think this is the most important thing to me. This was quite insightful to reveal that I think people fear more the quarantine stuff and travel being disrupted and then being stranded. And obviously this has got a financial implication too. People seem to be more bothered with that than the actual catching COVID on board. So that's insightful. And of course, I foresee that should change. It will change. But that also tells me that international travel should probably rebound very quickly once those things are sorted out, because and then also I'm sure medicine will have caught up as well. So I think it's going to be a very steep recovery once it happens. But during the times of uncertainty, we're still waiting and no one knows, so you rather err on the side of caution. So Liezl, I think possibly before 2023, it's going to look better than you might anticipate now. That's my hope, certainly.
Yes, please.
But we're still in for a bit of a rough ride where we're in limbo and you can't take the risk of being quarantined and not being allowed back in.
We have to remember, years ago, when the 9/11 tragedy happened, travel before 9/11 was actually super sleek and easy. And from a security perspective, I mean, none of us had to take belts off and we didn't have to take shoes off. We didn't have to take coats off and unpack laptops and batteries and all sorts of things. That has just become our normal. We don't even think about that twice when we get to an airport now. We undress, we take everything out, we put everything in the bin, we go through. And so I do absolutely believe that, initially that first shock, I mean, you did the domestic flight, I did too. There's a little bit of extra paperwork. I mean, I was still super excited just to be able to get away, change the scenery. The plane was absolutely rammed. There wasn't one seat open on that flight to Cape Town. So there's definitely a demand. People want to travel. They want to get from A to B. And it's just now getting used to what are the additional steps that I need to follow. But if there's a will and there's a real purpose and a reason for you to want to go somewhere, you will do what you need to do, and you'll investigate and you'll get the paperwork right. And then eventually when there's a vaccine, it's just going to be, I guess, the new normal. Like you have your little yellow passport with your yellow fever, stamp in it. This is going to, so we will adapt. I mean, and as a world, we will adapt. But we must also realize the world economy is broken and it's going to be broken for a while. So, so we need to kind of cycle through all of that and recover through that until such time as we can see things recovering again. But we absolutely aim to be around for all of that.
I think possibly in the M&A space, I think epidemiology and, the medical space is going to possibly be merged into travel so much more than it has in the past. And it will again just become an administrative step that you now think of very specifically, but it's going to become so commonplace that you won't even think twice. And it will be frictionless, I think, as we go forward to right now, still a few question marks.
Thanks, Cecilia. I mean, perhaps I've got a few final observations, Liezl, then I can give you the kind of concluding words. What I'm hearing a lot of, I'm an optimist by nature, because what's the point being a pessimist? We have to be realistic. And we've been through this crisis together as a chamber, as members, with the clients that we all have, and understanding how challenging it's been. And what we're already hearing is it's the uncertainty. It's the uncertainty around policy and regulations that is holding us back. But what I'm hearing loud and clear from yourself and from our High Commissioner is an optimism around Africa and South Africa, a commitment to keep trading here, and a commitment and our belief in there's a strong market to still come here. I'm hearing the importance of interdependence. I think we were heading in a world, Brexit Britain, Trump's America, whereby we could all operate in isolation. And now I know how hard Nigel is working, and you've been working, and we've been working to try and communicate to get policy certainty. These things kind of happen in isolation. We need strong networks and partnerships. And hopefully, you spoke about Booster, but with the Chamber, we're really trying to not just become talking shops, become places where we can bring together people's views and questions as we have today and push back to try and get a response. And I think none of us got the responses as quickly as we wanted. And, you know, through lockdown, it felt like we were banging our head against the wall around, why can we not do e-commerce? Why can we not travel? But we need these fora to come together to be powerful, to affect change. And today the borders opened, albeit with some restrictions. But I'm saying, again, it's an opportunity for innovation. It's an opportunity to celebrate leadership, because we've seen examples of superb leadership. And I'll point to yourself, Liezl, and Virgin in terms of being resilient through this crisis. We can look at the UK's political leadership, South Africa's. Let's look at the American presidential debate the other night in terms of what was that in terms of a show of leadership when the world needs it. So I think these are things that we all know. And actually, we had a session with ABSA yesterday. And a lot of these things that are considered to be soft skills really come to fore in a crisis. Your relationships, look after your people. We need to step up as leaders when there is a crisis. We cannot cruise, because the consequences of inaction are often worse than making no decision whatsoever. So I think the message I'm hearing is we're committed to Africa. South African route, we want to get going as quickly as possible. And we're going to keep putting pressure through the High Commissioner, through yourselves, to ourselves to say, we need some policy certainty. We need to get people moving because it's going to save jobs and ultimately save lives, but also just get back to some semblance of a lifestyle which we all want. And so at that point, Liezl, maybe some final words just from yourself and Virgin around the next few weeks and the next few months for you.
Yeah, so I first probably just want to start off by saying an enormous thank you to our very loyal customers. I know that there's a lot of them joined on this webinar who have been just incredibly supportive throughout an unimaginable difficult time. And so for us, it's all about these relationships, and these relationships that we hold in the highest regard. And you know, on this webinar, we also have some of our loyal flying club members, people who've been flying with Virgin Atlantic for many years, and we're just so thankful for loyal customers, and then for partnerships like we have with the Chamber, and the relationship that we enjoy with the High Commissioner and the UK Department of International Trade. It is so incredibly valuable. And you know, I can say this a million times over, you know, where we are within the Chamber, where we are within British business, you know, I think that we are, you know, leaps ahead of some of the other, you know, some of the other countries and other industries that we see around us. And for that, I'm truly thankful, because this is really how we navigate times like this. You know, you can call somebody on short time. I know we've been speaking through lockdown as well. It's important to kind of keep those doors open and just to stay really informed and understand the challenges and the issues that people are facing, and then kind of bring all of those pieces together. So again, just, you know, huge thank you to our loyal customers. I also want to do a quick shout out to my incredible team. We have been through some really tough times, and we are still going through tough times. And it's really difficult when you're a very close unit to, you know, to do the things that we needed to do to kind of survive. And I'm so grateful that, you know, we are the strong team that we are, and that we've managed to kind of get through the other end. And that we are seeing the red tail fin return with passengers on board later this month. That's a very exciting prospect to look forward to.
Yeah, no, thank you, Liezl, and just well done for keeping your business running. Thank you so much for supporting the Chamber. We'll be flying with you as soon as we can.
Yes,
thank you to Darren. Thank you for Darren for working with us and bringing this together. Nigel's
waving from the other side of the office.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you soon, Darren. I'd like to thank my team, as always. Cecilia, thank you for co-hosting with me. Emma for driving mission control. Leslie and Bernice behind the scenes. We couldn't do it without you. And the High Commissioner, thanking him. He will keep us posted, and we will communicate and re-communicate what comes out of there. And most importantly, to our members, like yourself, Liezl, we are here to serve our customers and our members. And thank you for staying with us. And we look forward to continuing to doing that. And we're looking forward to some in-person events in the very near future.
Yes,
so watch this space. Have a great day, and we look forward to flying and soaring again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.